Death was just a heartbeat away, but Donny didn't know it. What started as an ordinary lunchtime jog quickly spiraled out of control. In an instant, his world became a race against time, and the difference between life and death came down to moments of divine intervention. This is Donny's story. An ordinary day transformed into an extraordinary encounter with God's grace and protection. Before that fateful day, January 15, 2020, Donny was the picture of health and vitality. He thrived on routine, especially when it came to fitness. Every lunch break, you could find him at the gym or running outdoors, pushing himself to new limits. Fitness wasn't just a routine for him. It was part of his identity. That Wednesday afternoon started like any other. Donny laced up his running shoes and headed out for his usual route along the river in downtown Jacksonville. The crisp winter air filled his lungs and spirit, giving him that familiar boost of energy as he settled into his stride. The sun glistened brightly over the water, and in that moment, everything felt right in the world. But just as Donny was reaching a downhill stretch out of nowhere, a sharp, stabbing pain shot through the back of his head. It caught him by surprise, but Donny didn't let that stop him. He kept running, convincing himself it would pass, except it didn't. Moments later, Donny realized that his body was no longer cooperating, and he began veering to the left as if he were drunk. A sense of unease came over him. He slowed to a walk, scanning his surroundings for a bench to sit on. But before he could make it to safety, the world around him began to spin. His legs gave out as he blacked out and collapsed into some nearby bushes. Disoriented but determined, Donny managed to get back on his feet. To his surprise, no one came to help or even seemed to notice. He staggered to a bench, sinking down to catch his breath and wrap his head around what had just happened. Was it dehydration? Fasting? Maybe he'd pushed himself too hard. He couldn't make sense of it, but after a few minutes, Donny felt steady enough to make his way back to the gym. He showered, returned to his office, and told a colleague about the strange episode. She urged him to let her drive him home, but Donny waved her off. He felt fine, or so he thought. Donny's drive home was uneventful. When he got home, he fell back into routine, relieving his mother-in-law from watching his two kids, and went upstairs to change his clothes. As he started walking down the stairs, his legs suddenly felt heavy. His steps wobbled, and then a wave of dizziness hit him hard. He stumbled, barely catching himself. This time, he couldn't ignore it. He knew something was seriously wrong. He called his wife, who was working at her boss's house. She put him on speakerphone, and immediately her boss noticed something odd.
"Why does he sound like he's been drinking?"
she asked. Donny had no idea his speech was slurred. Sensing urgency, her boss began asking him simple questions that Donny struggled to answer. His words came out slow and incoherent. She recognized the signs immediately and without hesitation said,
"Call 911, he's having a stroke."
From that moment on, everything moved fast. A neighbor rushed over to stay with the kids. The paramedics arrived and started their tests. Strangely, they didn't suspect a stroke at first, but Donny's wife's boss was insistent. Looking back, Donny believes that God was speaking through her in that moment. As the paramedics transported Donny to the hospital, he remained in a fog, barely aware of what was happening around him. His mind was clouded, and the gravity of the situation hadn't yet sunk in. When they arrived, his wife was already there, waiting. She was visibly shaken but completely focused, like a steady anchor in the storm. In the ER, the doctor asked him,
"Do you feel normal?"
Donny nodded, unaware of just how far from normal he truly was. That's when his wife spoke up, pointing out something Donny hadn't even realized. The left side of his face was drooping. Her words made the doctors spring into action. They ordered an immediate scan, and the results revealed a clot in his brain. Within minutes, the urgency of the situation escalated. Donny was being prepped for a life flight to a downtown stroke center. Time was critical, and every second mattered. The helicopter ride was a blur. When he arrived at the stroke center, surprisingly, his wife was already there, somehow beating the helicopter to the hospital. The stroke team wasted no time. As they worked, they found a tear in Donny's right carotid artery, which had caused the clot. Acting quickly, they placed a stent to repair the artery and then focused on removing the clot. What should have been a simple procedure became a grueling, hours-long process. The clot had broken apart into smaller fragments, forcing the doctors to carefully remove each piece meticulously. Donny was awake the entire time, aware, yet in a daze, as if watching it all happen from a distance. When the surgery finally ended, Donny woke up surrounded by doctors running tests. Miraculously, he passed most of them with ease. The doctors were astonished by his recovery, and so was Donny. He believed in God, but experiencing this firsthand was different. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just medical expertise at work, it was a miracle. God was real, and he had just saved his life. Lying in that hospital bed, Donny had time to think, to really think. Every detail, every decision, every second that led to his survival, it all felt too perfectly aligned to be coincidence. From the quick thinking of his wife's boss to the presence of a top neurologist on call that night, every detail felt like part of a divine plan. He says,
"There's no way I should have survived those 6 hours between my run and the surgery. I know I had divine protection."
When he was finally discharged, Donny took his first steps outside the hospital on his own 2 feet. It was a moment he would never forget, one he would never take for granted. This wasn't just a physical recovery, it was a second chance, a reminder that God's grace is greater than any obstacle. He says,
"It wasn't by my strength that I survived, it was by God's grace."
Donny's story is a powerful reminder that God is present in every moment, even the ones we don't understand. Sometimes he speaks through the intuition of others. Sometimes he works through doctors and nurses. And sometimes he simply carries us when we can't carry ourselves. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and be sure to hit the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe and share this video so that together we can deepen our faith and celebrate the powerful love God has for us in this life and beyond. If you've experienced a divine encounter that you'd like to share, email your story to share at divinelyencountered.com. Let's continue spreading his light together. May God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.